And I'll run down through the candidates for each one. In a half minute, please tell us what you have done personally on behalf of historic preservation in San Diego.
What I have done on behalf of San Diego is I have served on the Historicity Committee of the La Jolla Historical Society. I do serve on the board of the Historical Society. And as a member of the Coastal Development Permit Review Committee, I was always saying, is that property over 45 years old? And have you done a report? And has the Historical Society seen it? I also worked very hard on the Black Lumpkins designation for La Jolla. We were very, very lucky to be so successful. Thank you.
In support of historic preservation efforts, I testified at the Historic Preservation Resources Board in favor of preserving the Mills Act and opposed to efforts to diminish it. I served on the North Park Planning Committee and was among those who signed a letter to try to tighten up the regulations for demolition, midnight demolitions in some cases, of historic properties that we have in our district. I have proposed a neighborhood right-to-know plan to provide for more community input into development processes that are being put forward, and I think that public participation is a real key in ensuring that we preserve our historic resources.
I opposed 301 University, which is an out-of-scale, far too large and poor precedent for the middle of Hillcrest. I supported the interim height ordinance with a lot of you, went down and testified at City Council to help get that passed and help preserve the uptown community. I've been outspoken in my criticism of the attempts to amend and change the Mills Act. It's a wonderful tool that we use successfully here in District 3. I'm proud to have the endorsement of State Senator Jim Mills, the author of that legislation, in this campaign. And probably most importantly to me is, as the past chairman of our LGBT Community Center, we work to help preserve our Union Hall that's over here on Center Street and turn it into a wonderful, vibrant community center for the community. It's a wonderful use of historic adaptive reuse.
Over the years, as the troubleshooter in news reports, I've encouraged the city to expand the Mills Act consideration to lower-income inner-city neighborhoods. And through this city council campaign, I've also advocated for neighborhoods faced with redevelopment, promoting policies that would preserve the values, history, and character of communities. Also, as a consumer advocate for the past 22 years, I helped to protect inner-city residents in many of the older neighborhoods from scams, rip-offs that could have forced them out of their neighborhoods and affected the character of communities. And as a city council person, I intend to make sure that we focus more on core services, public safety, and public transit, and livable neighborhoods.
Currently, no neighborhood notification is required for proposed demolition of potentially historic structures. Do you support this policy? 30-second answers. We'll go ahead and start with you, Susan.
No, I absolutely don't support that policy. The current notification all too often is when people wake up in the morning and find a historic bungalow demolished on the ground. That's not the right kind of neighborhood notification. People need to be notified in advance, and they should have the right to participate in the process. My neighborhood right to know plan would provide, number one, a 30-day review period for any issuance of a demolition permit of a historic structure to give the opportunity for the public to be involved. One other component of that plan is an expanded neighborhood notification radius for major development proposals that would come into a neighborhood. It currently is 300 feet. That's not enough.
The answer is no. No, I do not support that policy. I would prefer to see the community notified and given an opportunity to weigh in advance of a final decision being made. I think it's wrong. We've obviously seen plenty of examples in District 3 where this particular policy has been a bad precedent for our neighborhoods.
I also oppose the policy. Neighborhoods need to be informed about the demolition or changes in structures or communities that have historical value. It's ironic that it takes years, in my district, years to demolish the Aztec Motel, which was a haven for drug dealing and prostitution, but overnight you could see historic buildings disappear in a poof of smoke.
I bet you can't guess the answer. It is no, and I think as a minimum we should do the 300-foot notification, the planning group notification, the historical society notification, and of course, post the site. Now, I know some progress was made by the Land Use and Housing Committee, but probably not enough yet. We do need to be informed of what's going on. Thank you.
San Diego University economics professor Andrew Narwhal demonstrates in his study that the Mills Act increases tax revenue. Do you place more weight with this report or with claims the Mills Act revenue is lost for the city? You have 1 minute. Go ahead and start with your talk.
As a Torero, I need to point out that he is a member of the USD faculty. Just want to put that out. I do agree. I think I've read his research. I think it's convincing. Certainly the halo effect makes complete sense. You know, when someone has an opportunity to designate their home, the city as a whole benefits when the homes surrounding it, their property values increase. I disagree with the notion that this is a huge hit to our tax revenue. I suspect that he is correct, that the halo effect ends up wiping that away and making this a net positive for our city and for our neighborhoods.
And just to follow up on what Todd just said, it's not just Professor Norwald who is talking about the halo effect, but the materials that were provided for us to read on this issue show that same findings have been made by researchers all over the country. Ashbeer in Massachusetts regarding historical districts, Ford in Baltimore, Coffin in Illinois, and in Philadelphia, Ashbeer collaborated with Huffman and found that even vacant land in historically designated areas increase in value. They found a 131% increase in the value of just vacant lots in historical areas of Philadelphia. So I think it's really important that as we go through our city and our inner city neighborhoods, we find ways not just to preserve one building, but how do we preserve the block and maybe the street, the block across the street, and help keep communities together and create some continuity that will increase values within those neighborhoods.
The answer to the question is yes, I definitely place more weight on Professor Narwhal's study. And that is because he actually did a study. He didn't just look at the properties that had reduced property taxes. He looked at, as Todd described, the halo effect. And in doing the computations, if they're even close to true, we are getting $7 million profit on the current situation, which is terrific. It's unbelievable when reading the grand jury report as to the assumptions that were actually made, and in fact some of the facts and findings, which I'm sure most of you have read, don't seem to hang together very well.
The Mills Act sets a very high property condition standard to qualify for the program. Yet the mayor wants to restrict eligibility to housing stock that is in poor condition and to homeowners with income levels so low that restoration costs would likely be unaffordable. Would you agree or disagree this creates an unworkable catch-22? Please explain. You have 1 minute.
You bet. And it does create a catch-22. Instead of being exclusionary, we need to be inclusionary. By supporting buyers of more modest, more rundown properties, we are helping to increase property values, investments in the entire neighborhood, and providing opportunities to home buyers as well to build equity in something of long-term value. Take, for example, the community of Island Air, which is right inside the 7th District, right? I keep forgetting which side of Euclid it's on, but it is a wonderful example. Here's a neighborhood that it's lower income, as everybody says, but the investments that have been made, sometimes modest investments, have created a neighborhood that has great charm, wonderful value, and there are 113 homes that provide an example of what is possible in neighborhoods that have often been overlooked by the Mills Act. This was also part of the reason that while as a consumer advocate, I was talking about the Mills Act and the need to expand it from traditionally upper income neighborhoods to finding ways of applying it in every neighborhood of the city.
I don't know if this creates an unworkable catch-22 situation. I think we actually need to consider the possible reasons for why it is offered as a solution. And if the objective is to eliminate the Mills Act, then yes, it will achieve that. And if that's the mayor's objective, that's what we will get. But my understanding is it's not possible to even consider limiting the properties for which this will apply?
I believe that the Mills Act should be available to everyone, regardless of the condition of their property, regardless of their income level. And as I testified before the Historic Resources Board, I have real concerns about how the mayor's proposal will affect people of modest means here in District 3 who would like to take advantage of the Mills Act to preserve the historic integrity of their homes.
I would tend to agree that it is. The program, the Mills Act program must continue. And we must oppose efforts to make de facto elimination of this program, such as proposed by some of the limitations that are in the mayor's reform. But I do think that it's right that we encourage homeowners in less affluent communities to seek Mills Act designation. I want to acknowledge Patty Vaccarello from Island Air, who spent years to make her neighborhood get this designation so that we could preserve a wonderful community that's a part of my community of City Heights. She's done a lot of great work, but that can't be the exception. Property owners in Sherman Heights and City Heights and other places, their homes are worthy of preservation as well. So I hope that the activists in this room will come together to make sure that even less affluent communities are preserving their treasures.
Well, thank you. First of all, I live in a Irving Gill home, so I have a little bit of a conflict in answering this question, although I've never made use of the Mills Act. You know, I think of Paris, I think of London, I think of preserving our history, our architecture, our identity. I think these are things that we can never sacrifice, even in the face of critical financial issues that we are looking at today. And part of the problem with San Diego has been that we haven't preserved our identity. I was born here, my mother was born here, my children were born here. I think we have a wonderful history, but what is happening is we're destroying our neighborhoods. We are not respecting our history. And I think that those are the values that we should take into the discussion, into the decision making when it comes to the Mills Act and to the whole area of historical preservation in San Diego. I had one of my people here that promised they would clap after responses. Thank you.
Set a scenario. A number of California appellate court decisions have clarified that just because a city calls a development project ministerial does not mean it is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act if said project will have a significant effect on the environment. In 2 minutes, tell us what you will do when the Development Services Department attempts to declare high-rise buildings as ministerial when they will destroy historical buildings. Sherri, we'll go ahead and start with you on that one.
Can I just say I would freak out? I mean, this is really a several-part question, because first you're doing away with environmental review, then you're not considering possibly the community plan or the neighborhood compatibility features of the community plan, and then you're bringing in something that is conceivably completely out of character with the neighborhood without telling anyone about it. So we need to make sure that we have the opportunity to comment on the environmental document. That requires at least a minimal amount of notification. And we need to get our community plans updated, and then get the implementation for the proper zoning instead of continuing with zoning that doesn't really apply to the situation anymore. And in the interim, let's do an overlay zone to protect the community. That's it. I'll take more suggestions, so give me ideas afterwards, please.
I don't think that proposals for high-rise buildings should be classified as ministerial, not only when they affect historic properties, but when they affect the very character of the community. And a perfect example of that is the project formerly known as 301 University, right down here. Now the new proposal has called for not one, but 2 high-rise buildings ranging from 175 to 193 feet, I think it is. And they want to do that as a ministerial project, and that just boggles the mind. When a project like that is proposed, it absolutely has to be a discretionary project. I held a news conference after that proposal to do it ministerially came to light, and I called for a full public review and process and input and hearings into that proposal, not to mention the full environmental impact analysis on a proposal like that. It would have huge impacts on traffic, the community character, and so forth. And whether it's a good or bad project will be left to decide later, but the public has a right to participate in those studies, and that analysis has to be done. I will, as far as what I will do specifically, I will listen to neighborhood viewpoints about development projects that are coming in, and where there is significant neighborhood concern and the city is attempting to do it as a ministerial process, I will turn to the city attorney's office to discuss what we can look at and how we can implement CEQA and where CEQA might apply so that we can see that we have the environmental analysis done. And in any case, with historic resources, that should always be discretionary.
First of all, I want to emphasize I am not a candidate for the 1st, 3rd, or 7th district because there's some heavy artillery up here, and I want to make sure that no one thinks I'm running against anybody up here. You know, ladies and gentlemen, this has been such a bone of conflict, for our city attorney, because we, you know, with the 301B, with Rose Canyon, with Sun Road, you know, over and over again, the city attorney's office has found with our environmental lawyers that projects really needed to have a more careful review. Another one is the whole issue with Blackwater in the South Bay, and we issue our legal opinions and it gets ignored. And there's a much deeper institutional problem. We need to do away with development services altogether. Development services is, and I'm not saying that, you know, obviously, you know, that's popular, but the reason for that, Jonathan Friedman has a book out now called Hot, Flat, and Crowded. Thomas Friedman, thank you. And Hot, Flat, and Crowded. And basically what he's saying, and I think what he's saying, and scientists all over the world are saying, is that the whole way in which we do planning in the future has got to be dramatically different than what we've done in the past. And we've got the horse and buggy approach in San Diego. The developers drive the whole process, but there aren't really that many developers anymore. It's like the reader's representative at the UT. I was sad to see the reader's representative leave, and then I realized there's no readers anymore, so it's obvious that we don't need a reader's representative. But my point being is that what I would like to see instead is a new department called Planning and Environmental Protection. And what we need to do there is we need to get our neighborhood Bill of Rights in place. We need to get our planning groups, you know, much more empowered than they are, like they are in Los Angeles. We need to plan for all of the impacts of global warming, all the things about going green. This lady up here has a very ominous sign that says, "Stop, your time is up."
Doesn't say stop. Oh, man.
I'll add on a little later.
I can cede my time to the city attorney if you like. Okay. Well, I will be quick. You know, this is a very real problem for District 3. As was mentioned, you know, 301 University was a real experience for this community. It continues, and so it makes this very real for the people of the district I want to represent. The question was, what would I do specifically in such an instance? And you know, I would certainly, first thing would be to make sure that the preservation community, including SOHO, was informed of the situation. And I would seek their input from the preservation community as we try and move forward to address this. First off, I'd ask the mayor and his staff to stop the processing of the application until I could get a public hearing scheduled at the Land Use and Housing Committee to hear the specific issue around the project and to question Development Services staff on the designation prior to the approval. I would also request an opinion from the city attorney, and I would work with the mayor's office and city staff to create a new process so this cynical abuse of the system stops. We know this is a pattern, and we can't continue to fight these projects on an ad hoc basis. We need a comprehensive solution to this problem.
And I won't presume to put words in Mr. Aguirre's mouth, but let me take it a step further. Planning and environmental protection, that would be great. We also, I believe, need to roll CCDC and SCDC and these redevelopment agencies back into the city under the watchful eye of the redevelopment agency. They can hire an executive director, they can have a budgeting person, an auditing person, but these quasi-public, non-profit redevelopment agencies have become slush funds for people who have no oversight. There is very little accountability to the taxpayer, and it is your money being tied up in these redevelopment districts. In the 7th district, we have a beautiful community of small businesses, a bustling community right off Interstate 8 at Mission Gorge Road. Many of you may go to shop there, maybe hit the Home Depot store, or Iowa Meat, or any of the small businesses up and down Mission Gorge Road in Grantville. And here's a business community struggling to survive, being told they're blighted, being told that they need to be replaced with not high-rise, but high-density development that will only make problems worse. Traffic problems, congestion problems, pollution, strain on resources worse in that whole area. And I think it's time to rein in these redevelopment agencies. Whether it's Grantville or the Mission Valley Village Mobile Home Park. Recently, Archstone Smith, a subsidiary of Lehman Brothers, bought the property out from under 120 families in an established neighborhood. Their homes are now worth $0, and they're being told that they've got to move and be replaced with 440 apartments. So whether it's in the 3rd district, the 1st, the 7th, I think that it is so vitally important that we change the standard for developing and changing existing neighborhoods and make sure that those standards meet the needs of communities that exist there now.
Thanks, Marty. The grand jury, media, and Mayor Jerry Sanders have been highly critical of unethical and possibly felony abuse of City of San Diego tax money by the CCDC and SEDC. These development projects have threatened many historic houses downtown and the East Village. In about 2 minutes, please explain how you would reform the redevelopment agency to solve the legal and ethical problems and improve historic preservation. So let's start with you, Sam.
Downtown San Diego and southeast San Diego needed redevelopment, and southeast San Diego is still very much in need of redevelopment there. To grease the wheels of development in those two areas, the city set up these nonprofit corporations, these quasi-public agencies, to operate outside of the city's normal process for review and oversight. And when you blur the lines of accountability like that, you're asking for corruption. And it's no surprise that we got it. I think that that structure is fundamentally flawed. I think that those two agencies ought to both be dissolved, and they ought to be folded under the city's main redevelopment agency, where the proper oversight, the proper accountability, and the proper public participation can take place. Now, I do think that that main city redevelopment agency ought to make a top priority of the critical work that has yet to be done in southeast San Diego. And there is still certainly work that can be done in downtown San Diego. But I think the proper place for that is in the public view and a transparent operation under the city's main redevelopment agency. And while we're on the subject, one thing that I find particularly concerning is that amid all of this, there is talk of taking the main redevelopment agency and creating a similar corporate structure out of that. I can't think of a worse time to be considering doing to the main redevelopment agency what we have in CCDC and SEDC.
So Steve is still young, he can stand up at the end of the day. You know, I have to sit down. You know, redevelopment appears to me, after being in office for 4 years, as a means for transferring wealth to developers, primarily. CCDC really is in a position where it needs infrastructure. It really doesn't need to have CCDC anymore because you don't need to have incentives to develop in downtown San Diego. The momentum there is pretty significant. There's a downturn now. But one of the problems has been the whole idea of redevelopment is supposed to be something if it's in an inner city area, it's supposed to grow out of the community, something like what Robert Kennedy had in Bedford-Stuyvesant, where the community members decide that they want to try to grow their neighborhoods and take advantage of tax increment, and then there's a financing arm to help them achieve what is a community purpose. That is not what's happened here. CCDC, I can't talk about Nancy Graham or anything like that because that's currently under investigation, so I won't. But I will tell you that CCDC has outlived, and I don't want to come here and say let's collapse all the government in San Diego, but CCDC really is another part of the debris of history that needs to go. It doesn't really serve a purpose anymore. It's not needed anymore. The private market, you know what, remember we used to have people that used to believe in the private market before our friends all became socialists in Wall Street, and I don't understand it anymore, but now we have government intervention to preserve illegal profit-taking and all that. Well, we need, you know, I took a microeconomic course at Kennedy School, and I can't remember them talking about market intervention on behalf of market manipulators, but it would have been a good class, I will say that. But the point is what we need SCDC is a different issue. That's an inner city situation where you might need some more incentives there, but we do definitely need to collapse CCDC and reform the redevelopment agency, because remember, they've got a massive audit underway. I have to stop, but I'll try to finish that later.
I guess I'm young enough to stand. It's a long day. You know, folding these agencies into the redevelopment agency makes for a good soundbite, but it doesn't begin to address the root cause of this problem, which is the lack of effective legislative oversight by our city council. The city council is the redevelopment agency board. Simply rearranging the deck chairs says to me that we're going to face the same problem again just in a few years from now. What I would rather see is a legislative branch of government that has the wherewithal to actually provide the oversight that we really need at these agencies and at the redevelopment agency. We need council members who know what they're doing, that they have the ability to provide oversight, that they have the experience in doing that. I think a lot of my professional experience gets to that particular issue. With regard to historic preservation, you know, I would certainly ask the mayor and staff to let's look at the municipal code, let's look at the redevelopment code, let's figure out what changes need to be made so that this process can be changed. Specifically, I think what we need to do is make sure the staff at these agencies are actually trained in historic preservation. If they understand that cultural tourism is something to be valued and to be vaunted. I don't know that we have people there that are currently doing that. That's one place that we could at least begin to start this conversation.
And the beauty of this election is that half of that city council is terming out, and this city has an opportunity to start pretty fresh. And it's true under the proposition that created this strong mayor experiment in our charter. It said strong mayor, but it also said, it talks to the need for a strong legislative body. And that means 8 council members who are there representing all 150,000 or 200,000 constituents, who are good stewards of the public dollar and the public trust, and will watch where all of our tax dollars are being spent. And that's part of the reason I'm hopeful that we can roll these agencies back into the city, that they can be directly supervised by the city council sitting as the redevelopment agency, that we can create greater accountability in the way the city operates, and not just with redevelopment, with all of our public services. Right now the city is shy 22 fire stations just to provide basic response, the national standard of 5-minute response. When you dial 911, we're short 300 cops right now because we're not paying them a living wage to stay here. They're getting trained up in our academies and move out and go get jobs elsewhere. I was asked a question earlier in the evening, am I for public safety or public benefits? We got to get more cops on the street. We need more firefighters on the street. We need to take care of our water and sewer problems, our roads. We need to create accountability at City Hall once and for all. The kind of accountability that you deserve. You work hard. You pay your taxes. You pay up front for these services that aren't being delivered. Instead, money is being siphoned off into redevelopment agencies. No other city in California does redevelopment the way San Diego does, setting up these quasi-public agencies, nonprofits, where there's no accountability, no oversight. And the days of this kind of practice absolutely must end. And they must end November 4th.
I can't tell you in 2 minutes what to do to reform CCDC and SEDC. It's a huge problem. We're just beginning to maybe see what all is going on. I think we need to find out everything that did go wrong. We need to be aware of the grand jury report, the request for greater transparency. We need citizen participation on this. And maybe this is another one that you all can educate me on. Because the failure was in the oversight. It is an example of outsourcing gone awry. And let's, all of us, figure out what to do. As far as the historic properties, by having citizens involved and the neighborhoods involved, maybe as an advisory committee to some of these groups, we could make sure the resources are protected. Thank you.
The Land Use and Housing Committee has received an alarming number of complaints of illegal demolitions, fraudulent information provided to justify demolition, and city staff retroactively issuing permits to cover up the illegal demolitions. In 1 minute, how would you fix this problem?
Just report it to us and we will investigate it. I'm serious, really. You can call 236-6220 and we will investigate it. And if it's criminal, we'll investigate it at a criminal level. If it's civil, you know, the Town and Country had some issues where they had done some of that, and through our code enforcement with Diane Silva Martinez, we brought a case and resolved the case. We do those cases all the time. I'm hoping, you know, this is a time of tight budgets, but again, the illegal demolition, the illegal grading, the illegal misuse of our properties is something that has been tolerated and permitted through development services and accommodated. And so what I would love, if you want to do me a favor, I would give anything to have 5 cooperative city council members working with the city attorney for 4 years. We will change San Diego for the better. You won't even recognize San Diego. We'll have your water, your anti-fire, fire prevention. We'll have your roads, your streets, your bridges cleaned up. We'll get a good energy policy in place so we have renewable energy instead of this crazy fossil fuel thing that we're... I think she's cheating up here. And why is she wearing a Jan Goldsmith button?
He doesn't know you two, does he? Well, you know, the answer to this question starts with you. You know, if I were your council member, I would start and I'd go to the preservation community to ask how we can best address and find creative ways to solve this particular problem. My initial thoughts would be that we need to levy substantial fees and fines on those who perpetrate on illegal demolitions, like what we did with illegal grading. I would push for civil penalties for illegal and fraudulent demos. I think something we need to do is some community outreach and education. We have City TV for a reason. Maybe we could talk to them about a PSA. Maybe Marty could do it. Probably most importantly, impactfully, I'd like to serve on the Land Use and Housing Committee, and if so, I would like to make this a particular priority. We have to find a way to address this particular issue.
Gee, Channel 24, don't get me started. And there's a revenue maker too, you know? Having a television station is like having a license to steal. It's wonderful. But actually, Channel 24 could be used as a vehicle to educate the public and also provide better education to people who work in the field, staff members and city employees, to make sure they absolutely understand the rules, because if they don't follow the rules, if this kind of fraud is committed, I say heads roll. It has to be. You sit down with the city unions and explain, these are the allegations, these are the concerns. Let's make sure everybody's on the same page and understands the importance of following the rules and again, restoring the public trust. Now more than ever, I think, it's important on every level of government for people who are called to public service to understand that probably the biggest task before us is to make sure that we don't keep violating the public trust. Because when the public doesn't believe in the process and the system, they stop voting. They stop being involved. And then the bad guys win.
I think the bad guys are already winning. Yes, I think. I apologize. You know, before Labor Day weekend, or before the 4th of July weekend, or before any 3-day holiday weekend, you start getting phone calls. It starts about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and something's going on, and you can't get anyone out to stop it. The illegal demolitions and grading do have to stop. The way to stop that is to make the fines commensurate with the damage, and no more of this, oh, I'm sorry, please forgive me. It's so much easier to beg forgiveness than it is to get the permission. And I know when we were dealing with this with respect to illegal grading, found out that the city of San Francisco actually implemented a program where the fine was equivalent, it wasn't $1,500, it was $25,000. You need to make it so it's not an ordinary cost of doing business. And let's do it. We can do it.
Well, to some degree, I suppose it's correct to say that it starts with you, but why does everything have to start with you? You are starting so many things, and have been starting so many things for so many years and fighting so many good battles. When is it going to start with the city council in this city? The city council needs to complete our historical resources survey so that we have a record of what the historic and contributing properties are. And once we have those, that will help this situation. My neighborhood right to know plan calls for a 30-day waiting period when there are these permit proposals for demolitions. And it calls for it to be a discretionary process. There are things that the city council should take the initiative on to prevent this. And when we do have situations where there are fraudulent information given to the city, the penalties should be stiff and they should be severe. And if somebody at the city is covering up by going back and changing records, they ought to be fired. Jail. Yeah.
Do you think the phrase affordable housing is a buzzword with little legal definition? And how do you feel about paying in lieu, the paying of in lieu fees to avoid paying for affordable housing or infrastructure to the community? In 1 minute. Let's start the process.
This is not a buzzword. It's my life's work and it's my passion. I love affordable housing. I've spent many years now serving our community, trying to expand the affordable housing that we have. This is a real issue for the people of District 3. Unfortunately, we have folks that are doubling up, converting garages, all because they can't find a way to live in this community affordably. This is particularly difficult now as the rental market constricts through the foreclosure crisis. It is not a buzzword. It has a legal definition. The Department of Housing and Urban Development gives us the standard that about 1/3 of your rent of your income should go to housing. If it's beyond that, then it becomes unaffordable. I think that's a fair measurement for that, and that's what we use at the Commission to try and determine whether something is particularly affordable or not. The in lieu fee. You know what? We have been able to take some of those fees and leverage those with other dollars, tax credit deals, grants, bond money that you've approved as voters to create additional housing. I think often we can yield more if we do get those. So I love it when the folks can build it on site, but in some cases I think it's a net benefit for the community because you do get more units if you go that way. So I want to see a funding amount, an in-lieu fee that's actually comparable to market, and that it actually generates the dollars that we need. But I think we need to find out, and we need to keep that open so that we have the flexibility that the commission can use.
I believe that while there are legal definitions for affordable housing, I think it has become something of a buzz phrase anymore. It's overused, and this market loses its significance for people who have been shut out of rental and home buying markets. Increasing housing costs is a major driver of inflation here in the San Diego region, and often the word affordable housing is used to scare people or to turn people off from projects. We obviously need to create more housing that is affordable to low and moderate income families and stop pushing it off with in-lieu fees and transfers to other neighborhoods. I think that guts the concept and benefit of inclusionary housing strategies and intent. A neighborhood that's truly rich has a mix of people who have money and don't have a lot of money, and they're all working together to create a community. Taking a little shift here, I also do support the loan bank, which is currently being organized. I believe the city should manage incoming federal dollars to help salvage mortgages and assist consumers who now may have the ability to buy here in San Diego. And we need to use all of our strategies to offer opportunities to people instead of using these buzz phrases, affordable housing and so forth, to scare people off from supporting new projects that are really needed in the inner city.
There is a definition for affordable housing. It is based on the average median income, and there are different percentages set for different types of projects. However, it is also used as a gimmick to get increased density and deviation to projects' parameters that somehow this makes it okay, and including the reduction in parking. The existence of an in-lieu fee has made it so that my community, where I did most of the land use work I've done, cannot get affordable housing. We lose affordable housing. When applicants are asked, you have more than 10 units, why don't you provide your 10% affordable units on site? No, we'll pay the $1,500, no problem. And it does create a problem when you move the affordable housing out of a community. District 1 does have affordable housing, and it was part of master planned communities. It is in Carmel Valley, Rancho de los Penasquitos, University City, Torrey Hills. It is all through the rest of the community. But La Jolla, with the older properties, which were affordable, that are being demoed and replaced by 3, 4, 5 units, we don't. We're losing it.
Yeah, this is one of the areas where Todd and I have a different perspective on a development issue. I don't think that the in-lieu fees are working. Like Marti and Sherri articulated, I think that we need to have affordable units on site. Not only do we get more affordable units that way, that we have seen historically as work, but beyond that, we see those affordable units built within the communities, and it creates a broader diversity of within the communities, and I think that inherently is good. Affordable housing needs to encompass a wide range of affordability needs. We need affordable housing for the poorest amongst us. We need affordable housing for our seniors, for our students, for our workforce housing. And affordable housing, especially in District 3, can take the form of a real need for more apartments in some areas. In District 3, we've seen a great number of condominium conversions that have priced people right out of the district. I've talked to a couple of people who have lived here in District 3 for many, many years, and during the condominium conversion craze, they were forced to leave our wonderful district because their apartments were converted to condominiums and they had nowhere to go. So we need to make sure we have a good mix of housing in District 3.
Water policy, housing policy, energy policy is about managing not allowing the developer community to dominate the entire development of policy. One of the best ways to get affordable housing is to stop foreclosures on subprime loans, which is one of the things we're trying to do in the city of San Diego right now. How were they able to build all that housing and put all those loan originations together with people that clearly didn't have the ability to pay the loans? And what happened was the housing machine just kept spewing out houses in areas that they knew people couldn't really afford them. And then they got the mortgage bankers to go along with providing loans that really were not, sustainable. And they threw in a little, subprime activity there where the loan goes from $1,500 to $4,500. I was back in Boston last Thursday morning arguing for the city of San Diego and with 6 other states attorney general to in fact get an injunction to stop subprime foreclosures. That's the best way to get affordable housing. But you have to understand something. You can't allow SCG&E to dominate energy policy. You can't allow the developer community and BIA to dominate the policy when it comes to housing. You can't allow the same with water. You can't allow private companies to dominate on water. Each one of these areas is important for us all to be involved in and realize that we can solve it, but not in isolation.
What solutions do you have that allow for a new development at the same time preserving existing community character, Marti?
I think the recent example of Kensington is probably fresh in everybody's mind here. Here, the neighborhood was fighting City Hall and was fighting developers, and they felt as though nobody was listening. And finally, they had to file a lawsuit in order to get the attention of the city and the developer. And ultimately, they sat down together. They worked out a compromise, and I think it wound up being good for Kensington. But it shouldn't have to go that far. I think that the city needs to be more responsive when communities stand up and say, that really doesn't work in our neighborhood. Stop identifying people as NIMBYs because they don't like a big development in the heart of their community. Listen to them. Change the culture in those redevelopment services, the development services office, to work with communities and find solutions to these kinds of disputes. Because I hate this term, at the end of the day, but really, at the end of the day, when we pull into our neighborhoods and come home, we want to make sure that the neighborhood is what we want it to be. This is where we've made our investment, where we've laid down roots. So some re-education, cultural re-education at the city to educate them about individual neighborhoods, listening to the community groups, creating a process by which they can actually create the plan that they will live with, and don't drive the community away, because filing lawsuits and creating this kind of distraction isn't good for our neighborhoods and the people, again, who are paying the tab and keeping the city going.
When we bought our current home 16 years ago, we looked for a house we liked in a neighborhood we liked. It wasn't until about 9 months later we discovered we were horribly naive. You were supposed to buy, tear down, and build what you want. Now, in the area I live, La Jolla Shores has a planned district ordinance. La Jolla has a planned district ordinance. La Jolla Shores had a precise plan. We have a community plan. All of which say new development is to be compatible with existing development. Somehow, there are parameters set out, bulk and scale, color palette, materials, landscaping, streetscape requirements. And yet, sometimes, or quite a few times, those aren't abided by, because staff chooses not to enforce the regulations on the books. And sometimes, in fact, it's an, oh my, they got an over-the-counter permit. So it doesn't even come. Exactly. No further comment needed. That's what happened to the Cove Theater in La Jolla. If you've ever gone there, you now see what it is. And it doesn't look like the Cove Theater in any way, shape, or form. I think we need to be very aggressive in making development services department accountable for the enforcement of the regulations that we work, and our plans that we work so hard to get in place. We need to, also adaptive reuse is such a perfect tool.
We need good development that will revitalize our business districts and create good new jobs. We need the sorts of developments that have been done in North Park and in City Heights and in other areas around the district. Developments that have revitalized the area while at the same time maintaining the character of the community and the historic resources that make these communities special. And when we revitalize these neighborhoods, we find that it does and can influence a reduction in crime. And ultimately, over time, by revitalizing a neighborhood, you can increase the quality of our public schools, which is something that is so important to so many of us. One thing that has worked well are themes. In North Park, for instance, there's a whole business district theme centered around arts and culture and entertainment, and it has brought vibrancy in restaurants and things that have really added to the character of the community. We've seen that elsewhere in the district, and we need to encourage that more.
I think the era of development in San Diego is over. It's over. We're overbuilt. The era of the green age is upon us. Infrastructure, our roads, our streets and bridges, we need to completely retrofit them. 70% of our roads are below the national standard. Our bridges are in horrible condition. Our alleys, horrible condition. And we need to spend billions of dollars on that type of renovation, as well as renewable energy. Right now, you know, we have LNG coming in through Ensenada, up through the pipes, and it'll burn dirty here. And that's a major problem. We don't need to build a new dependence on a foreign source of natural gas when we clearly have the ability to go with renewable energy. That's why we're all over SDG. You need to live up to their obligation to have 20% renewable. We need to have a massive program to retrofit all the houses, the rooftops, all over the city. How exciting would that be? That's what I say, 5 city council members, that's what I need. You give me 5 city council members, I'll back them up all the way, we'll figure out how to finance it. We'll get the financing. You know why? Because the Wall Street Journal says that Mike Aguirre is a national model. Okay? I didn't make that up. And then lastly, we need a secure water supply. I don't care if you recycle ocean water, you recycle wastewater, we're going to have some type of massive recycling system. Why? Because 90% of our water is imported, and imported water right now is not something that is going to be plentiful. So we need, just think about what we're talking about. Total renovation of San Diego, building a whole new power structure of San Diego, not getting rid of anybody, but broadening and deepening and bringing people in. I see the face of San Diego here. I like what I see right here. We could build a whole new leadership structure just starting with the group right here.
You're going to have it.
You know what? Every time I say something she doesn't like, she brings up the sign.
The question was about new development. And I think it has to be clearly stated that new development must go through the community process and it must follow design guidelines. The way that we can best do that is by making sure we expeditiously update our community plans. They are out of date, and that's what's getting us into so many of these problems that we're experiencing in the neighborhoods of District 3. But more importantly, I think that it's important that we look at potentially establishing, and I think I would support, a mid-city historic neighborhood conservation district. This is something that's been proposed and floated in the community, and it would add an additional layer of protection for our neighborhoods against inappropriate infill. I think that community plan updates and looking at that conservation district would be a good way to go.